Hello everyone. In this video, I'll be reviewing Vanquish in its entirety, so spoilers ahead. I suggest you to experience the game first before watching this video. The game is relatively short in length. Vanquish is a third-person cover shooter developed by PlatinumGame, released back in 2010 on the PlayStation 3 and Xbox 360. The PC version came out on Steam during May of 2017, ported by Little Stones Software right after the release of Bayonetta's PC port. Thankfully, the game is well ported once again by them, running better than before in terms of performances, making it the definitive way to play Vanquish. The game was directed by Shinji Mikami, the man who brought us Resident Evil and later on directed Resident Evil 4. With a fair share of experience on making shooters, Mikami wanted to create another one with an emphasis on speed that departs from his previous works, hence Vanquish was born. The game starts off with a cutscene showing the peaceful living environment of San Francisco. Suddenly, a giant laser beam was aimed and shot on the entire city from outer space, destroying the city and the citizens. Turns out, Russia took over the colony that controls the solar energy driven generator called the Providence and decided to turn it against America. Viktor Zaitsev, the villain of the game and the man in charge of the group called the Order of the Russian Star, demands America to surrender before they blast the generator again towards New York City in 10 hours time. Showing no will of surrender, the President of the United States, Elizabeth Winters, decided to send a newly formed space troops led by Lieutenant Robert Burns to invade and reclaim the space station from the hands of the Russians. The protagonists, Sam Gideon, were given permission to tag along with the troops in order to rescue Dr. Candide, the man who designed the generator and Sam's suit. With that, the mission begins after showing the troops' spaceship breaching through an entrance into the colony. The entire opening cutscene takes about 7.5 minutes and it still feels pretty hasty. It is hard for a new player to grasp the story fully even after sitting through the whole thing due to the lack of context and explanation of the situation. All I get when I first started the game was America was under Russia's threat, Sam's mission is to save Professor Candide, and the soldiers are not very fond with him in the team because he works under a different organization. In several past interviews, Mikami has clearly stated the story of Vanquish is not prioritized, rather, the action and the gameplay is the focus of the game. It is clear that the game was never meant to be story-centric after watching the opening cutscene, but even so, I think it can relay messages more clearly than it is. Having less acronyms in the dialogues helps, using better scenes to convey info helps. That said, what I like about it is the mention of time limit left before the laser beam launch again. It gives a sense of rush to the players, and since we clash into the war zone straight away, the feeling of that rush maintains straight from the get-go. The whole game spans around 8 to 10 hours too for my first playthrough on the normal difficulty. Although there isn't a timer pushing me forward, completing the first playthrough right about the time span is kinda neat, and it adds just slightly into my overall experience. Different players tackle games differently and say if players complete the game sooner, it still makes sense as you have stopped the massacre in time. So the only problem is on players that exceed that playtime, and there are definitely elements in the game that will drag on time play such as the collectibles. Anyway, this is just a small little thing I find interesting that I wish to share. Even though it adds just a little to the overall game, I think it is neat for them to hint out loud on just how long the game might last. The tutorial of the game is an entire different mode on the start screen, which I think is convenient in some ways. By not teaching players in the actual mission, the game kicks into action as soon as the mission starts, and given that you're in a hurry mission, it worked out nicely. There's only some minimum mechanic reminders such as asking you to boost slide through a hole. One little thing to note is that the conversation between Sam, Elena, and Professor Candide in the tutorial explains the restriction of the mechanics in the game. They explain Sam can only have 3 weapons at a time because of the system's configuration limitation. The recoil has been reduced because the suit compensates it with some sort of tag. Melee attacks will drain your meter away because the engine has to generate extra forces and so on. It is a simple and convenient way to justify and address the restrictions of the suit in a logical way within the game, which I think is pretty neat. When the PC version was announced, one concern came in mind, that is regarding to the game's balance issue. Since it was a shooter designed to play on a controller, it might become too easy now that players have the advantage of aiming with a mouse. For that very reason, I deliberately experienced the game with a controller on my very first normal difficulty playthrough, but it didn't take long for me to realize using the mouse and keyboard is the better option. My concern on the balance seems to be an unnecessary one. Mouse and keyboard doesn't make the game easier, but rather much more comfortable and natural as you would expect aiming with a mouse. I don't see a reason going back to using the controller. In my opinion, the mouse and keyboard control method literally replaced the controller in this game's case. The game surely plays like a third-person cover shooter, but what stands out in Vanquish is definitely the boosting mechanic Sam can perform with his suit, the augmented reaction suit. The suit allows Sam to slide in high speed in the battlefield, and activate AR mode which slows down time both manually and automatically. The fast-paced, speedy action that Mikami wants to achieve in this game is heavily relied on the boosting mechanic alone, and speed he gets. The slow motion mechanic ties with the high speed boosting seamlessly due to how they complement each other. Tying the activation with the aim button, players can enter AR mode manually after jumping out of a cover, while boosting, and even after a sliding jump kick shown in the video. However, players have to manage the usage of it as the suit will go overheat if the meter depletes completely. AR mode also activates itself automatically while you are critically injured. This gives you time to escape out of peril by allowing you to destroy your enemy or get into cover. A fight or flight situation if you will. But the engine overheats afterwards and you'll be more vulnerable to the enemies. The adrenaline rush from the high speed action wouldn't be that great if the slow motion feature is absent. Something about going real fast, transitioning into slow motion to get rid of enemies, and going back fast again never stops to be stale. The alternating between high speed and AR mode is the core gameplay loop of the game itself. There are no ammos to pick up in the game. Instead, picking up a replica of a weapon will fully replenish its ammo. Run out of ammo and you'll have to adapt by using another weapon. On top of that, acquiring the same weapon while it is fully ammoed gives you a partial of an upgrade, shown as insignias beside the gun. As for a direct upgrade to the next level, players have to pick up an upgrade chip dropped by the enemies. Weapons drop a single rank after you died in a chapter, but any other following deaths within the same chapter will not downgrade them any further. A small yet significant enough punishment, especially when players' weapons are at the max level, since the last upgrade is the strongest one. At first sight, the weapon system may look like the game encourages players to mix up the loadout, but it fell short because of the upgrade system itself, so hear me out here. If a player favors one particular gun in the game, they will more likely to keep it in their hand. And if they are to focus upgrade on one particular weapon, they'll have one less weapon of choice during combat because they need to preserve the ammo so that whenever they see the same gun, they benefit from it by getting a partial rank up, without having to refill the ammo first. This arguably forces players to use the other two less favored weapons in the slots, but I beg to differ. The point of having 3 weapons is to have a balanced selection, not keep one in the pocket and spend the other 2. A little exploit can be done to ruin the upgrade system one step further, which I am about to showcase here. If you have a used gun on hand, for example a shotgun, and you encounter another new one out there, swap out the shotgun you are holding with another different weapon. Now you do not possess a shotgun. Then, pick up the new shotgun, and since it is new, the ammo is full. Lastly, pick up the shotgun you dropped earlier to get an upgrade off from it. I'm sure this is not the intended way to upgrade the guns, because the game specifically told you to replenish your ammo with a fresh gun. This trick lets you to skip the step of having a fully ammoed gun before you get a partial rank up. By doing so, you don't have to shy away from using the weapon you wish to upgrade. As long as there's one bullet left in your gun, you can get an upgrade whenever you see a replica. I discovered this exploit by myself halfway through the game, and I'm sure a lot of players will manage to come upon this by themselves without looking up online. Since it is not difficult to figure this out, it proves to be problematic. A way to fix this is to just let the players get the upgrade and refilling the ammo at the same time by picking up a replica. That way, it will not only negate the exploit, but also erase the refrain of using the weapon players wish to upgrade. If a player wants to upgrade a specific gun, chances are it is a gun they are fond of, and discouraging them from using it just doesn't feel right. After putting enough thoughts in the upgrade system, I conclude that it is tricky to make it work, and the one present in the game is not ideal. Either with the exploit, upgrade chips, or the partial upgrade system, the game encourages you to keep your favorite weapons in your pocket more than it wants you to mix them up. Personally, I think an upgrade system is unnecessary. Upgrading the guns do not change how the gun works in a huge way. Only in God Hard mode, the game pushes you to swap out your weapons because the upgrade system is taken out. Use up the ammo and you'll need a replacement. I found myself enjoying the game more when there is no concern on upgrading the weapons. I preserve ammo for the actual combat, not for the partial upgrade. And that's the one thing I like in God Hard mode. While we're at the topic of weapons, let's talk about weapon designs of the game. There are different ways to compensate aiming for a console shooter. For one, making the hitboxes of the targets or the bullets bigger than it seems can reduce precision requirement. Reducing recoil can also be implemented, which Vanquish explicitly applied and justified with a reason. And then the design of the weapons held a role. Take the energy type weapons in the game for example. The lock-on laser, low frequency energy gun and the laser cannon all require lesser degree of aiming. In exchange, they play out more interesting than the other guns. Lock-on laser have used scan and release with the aim button to launch lasers that rains down on targets. The low frequency energy gun's projectile is huge and goes through barricades. All these quirks adds onto the shooting varieties. The laser cannon in particular is an interesting weapon that stood out to me. It may seem a little overpowered at first, but it balances in an interesting way. Firing it uses the engine power of your suit, so using it during AR mode drains the meter faster. On top of that, it cannot be fired up when your suits overheat, forcing you to resort to other weapons in dangerous situations. Apparently, the laser cannon is one of 3 guns that were in a pre-order DLC pack back in the days, along with the anti-armor pistol and boost machine gun. Knowing that disappoints me a little bit. I find locking weapons out from the main game is pretty distasteful. Although I think the pistol and the other machine gun are less interesting, the laser cannon alone certainly adds into the overall experience of the game. There is no reason these guns are locked behind the main game other than to boost the pre-order sales. Thankfully, the PC version includes all of them. Melee attacks are strong but risky. Executing just one melee attack that connects with an enemy will completely drain out your meter. This is to avoid players reliant on melee attacks. If using melee attack only drains a fraction of the whole meter instead of overheating, players are likely to use it very often, and due to the meter replenishes over time, the game will stray away from being a shooter because the gap between each melee execution will be shortened to the point where melee is always an option available. It is obvious that the devs want players to shoot more instead of engaging to melee, but instead of removing melee entirely, they keep it in to expand the gameplay and decisions. To risk using a strong melee attack and leave yourself wide open for a few seconds, or to play it safe and slide away to another cover. Approach the boss to deal more damage with a kick or to hide and shoot from afar. It creates risk and reward situations. One of the major theme presents throughout the game is the theme of sacrifice for the greater good. This is backed up by the ideals and motives of the characters in the game. For example, the Russians sacrificed innocent lives for their own selfish greater good. Burns leaving his men behind in order to advance in the mission, and the president's decision to attack Moscow with the microwave for the sake of
Consider it a kind of economic stimulus package.
What? War is not economic stimulus. San Francisco is gone now.
That was for the good of all Americans.
Even Sam's final remark from the ending is tied into the theme.
You know, I'm not that different from Burns. We both sacrificed others to uphold our own ideals.
But Sam, you saved so many more than that.
Yeah.
But once again, due to the lack of emphasis on the story, the theme fell flat, making it somewhat jarring whenever it's been brought up on screen. It is more like a reminder of hey, we have a theme going on, more than anything else.
You two, stay here.
Yes, sir! Will you die?
Come on, we're moving.
Burns! Still got one out there.
Shut that thing.
Still helping.
Screw 'em! Elena, close this door!
Understood.
So this is how the Marines do business.
Marines, complete the mission. We don't get the luxury of choosing how.
I suppose one of the reasons they feature robot troops as the enemy and humans as allies is a choice related with the theme, making the targets justifiable to be shot and killed, dismissing contradiction of the character's motives. Allies in a game like this can either drag the player experience down by being too helpful or too useless, sucking out the fun of the game. Thankfully, I think the friendly AI in this game stands in the middle. The purpose of them fighting in the field is to distract enemies, but they are vulnerable too. When they are heavily injured, players can approach them to heal them up before the enemies finish them off. Since there's a kill count of your troops in the scoring page, players would likely assume letting them die will affect the score in some way. Ideally, you are encouraged to save them, as the game rewards you a weapon drop for each one you support. Tying with the theme of sacrifice, you have to choose between risking your safety to save them, or favor your position and let them die. But the clumsiness of the AI does not help to enhance the theme. Some enemies can just instant kill them without giving you the option to save them. Sometimes, they just stand in the EMP where enemies spawn. Players have no control on them, and due to that, they can be a hindrance more than being helpful at times. They weight too little to tie into the theme, and you don't feel much towards each individual soldiers either. So they only goes as far as only being a mechanic for the game. Sometimes distract enemies effectively enough to be helpful, and to enhance the settings of a battlefield. If you have been watching the footages of this video, you might notice that Sam's suit is part of the UI of the game. It is showing his HP using color indication and bomb counts on the waist. Personally, I like to see more intrusive free UI design like this in games. One came in mind was Dead Space. The protagonist of that game, Isaac, also wears an exosuit that displays his health and so on. Too bad the suit in Vanquish doesn't show the AR meter consumption, which left me dumbfounded. Using color indication on the engine to portray the meter like how it shows Sam's condition could be a nice feature, since boosting is such a huge part of the whole game. It is frustrating to peek at the meter when Sam is sliding full speed ahead on the bottom left of the screen, while the meter is on the bottom right direction. Same goes to shooting in AR mode. You have to keep an eye out on the meter if you do not wish to go overheat while shooting. This bugs me even after about 30 hours of playtime. I would imagine the boosting will be much more enjoyable if there's a simple visual cue of meter consumption on the suit itself. The game uses an arcade-style scoring system. Scores are brought along through each missions, and each death penalizes players 1000 points. You can even get to negative points if you die enough. That said, one huge problem stood out so much that it makes the scoring system counterintuitive, which is the lack of explanation on score gains and loss. While each category are shown to the player, there is no context on which and how these elements contribute into the total score, ultimately leaving most of them being guessworks. How many points will I lose when I use the cover? Do I get points for saving an ally, or do I lose points for each of their deaths? This is a huge problem to score attack players, as they need to know what actions contribute to their scores and what to avoid doing to minimize score losses. Not to mention, part of the replay value of the game comes from it too. There are so many space left on the scoring screen. Surely a number of swords can be shown beside each element to clear the clouds, but it ended up being a waste of space instead. It is a shame that they didn't flesh it out. The scoring system will be so much more viable if it is transparent to the players. Weak character writings is evident, though it doesn't affect the overall experience much, since it has always been action focused. Burns, for example, is a strong and merciless leader that quotes over liquors. The back and forth dialogue between him and Sam and the occasional camaraderie between them are corny as well. As the protagonist, Sam is still pretty shallow of a character. His constant need of a smoke is surface level of cool, and it came out to be comical. Though I appreciate they implemented the cigarette as a little mechanic in the actual game. Sam can toss a cigarette out from covers to distract enemies for a while. It's a pretty cool inclusion nonetheless, but really the star of the game is the suit itself. The smoking, liquor references and one-liners doesn't take long to get old. Then again, it isn't a game that takes itself too seriously. Mikami has a record of injecting his character in games with a cheese sense of cool. Take Leon and the Merchant from Resident Evil 4 or Jean from God Hand for example. As for Vanquish, I guess one-liners, cigarettes and liquors are appropriate for the job.
You're last year's model!
Bosses reappearing is common in the game. This will not be a problem if the re-encounters contain different gameplay varieties. For example, a weapon upgrade on the boss to be aware of, or place them in a different settings from before. But sadly, most of the re-encounters are pretty much the same fight. You fight the unknown 3 times the same way in a square room. The Crystal Viper appear twice also in a similar settings. The Argus and Buzzard fights are less repetitive but not much different either. The first Argus in the beginning, which I think is the best out of 3 encounters, have you fight in a 2-level battlefield, where you can choose either to shoot it in a higher floor or approach it on the level he stands. Second encounter have you face 2 of them at once, and one more encounter later in the game in a playing field, this time with some special abilities. As for the Buzzard, one of 3 encounters is a fight on a train, and the rest are identical. Adding 1 or 2 more unique bosses varieties or different battlefields are definitely welcome. The re-encounters shave off the characteristics of the bosses, making them less memorable aside from the first fight. Since boosting is such an important movement of the game, having stages with environmental hazards or interactive objects would be a nice inclusion, but they are nowhere to be seen. How about some electrified walls and covers that will go on and off in a cycle? Or bumps that will launch Sam mid-air to perform aerial slow motion shootings, but maybe I'm asking for too much here. There are shootable golden statues hidden all over the game to serve as collectibles, but knowing that it doesn't reward the players anything at all for finding all of them, I find it pointless, and it could disrupt the pace of the game if you go out your way to find them. I suggest you to experience a playthrough ignoring the statues, leave the collection to another extra run. This is just a nitpick from me, but if boxes that contain guns can be shot open, that would be cool. Instead of opening them manually, imagine sliding towards them, shoot it open and get the weapon can be satisfying to execute and improve the flow of changing guns off just a little better. There are also some missed opportunities to increase gameplay varieties. For example, there is a zero gravity room near the end of the game, and the game did not take the advantage of the zero G to create an interesting battlefield. During the last boss fight, Sam is forced to unlock the limitation of his suit to match Sisef's speed. The AR meter is enhanced and the speed of the boosting is increased tremendously. Amping the speed like that is extremely memorable and enjoyable to play, however, players can only experience this at the later half of the final boss fight. They could have made an escape sequence that takes advantage of the ridiculous unlock speed as the final act, but sadly the escape was done with a cutscene instead. All that said, there are enough one-off sequences spread across the entire game to differentiate from the usual high-octane battlefield shootouts. There's a pseudo-escort mission in the Dark Tunnel, rush escape sequence where players have to push forward before the highway collapse, stealth sequence on the monorail where you destroy spotlights before they detect you, traverse through the core of a giant battleship without getting atomized by the energy, and so on. These sequences happen only once from the entire playthrough, but less is more is how I will put it. The hardest difficulty the game has to offer, God Hard mode, doesn't offer much sadly. You have the usual replace weaker enemies with the stronger ones, enemies are tankier and hits harder. All these basic tweaks are there. On top of that, enemies will not be aggroed by allies as long as they spot you in their line of sight. Their prioritized target will always be you. Emergency AR mode stays up shorter before it gets overheat, which will put you into danger very quickly, and as mentioned, weapons upgrade are prohibited. Generally, it narrows down the windows of mistakes. A wrong move can result to big punish. Getting one shot by enemies happen more often. Sure, it can be brutal, but these changes hardly affects how the game is played. If anything, it demolished the high-speed experience the game has at the first place, forcing you to use cover all the time and to cheese through some situations. Not to mention, getting one shot without having a chance to react is frustrating, and it often felt cheap and unfair, making it a less thought out, difficulty ramp up more than anything else. I do not recommend you to complete the game in God Hard. The pacing of the game seems to be multiplying as the mission goes on, quite literally. Example being the appearance of Argus. At first you only fight one of them and the game tosses you 2 at the same time later on. Same goes with the drill machine that transport enemies. First you encounter one drill and the next time you see it, the number triples, adding in a saw tank to escalate the situation. Multiplying enemies that are considered threats is a simple yet effective way to increase tension in the battlefield. When it comes to Platinum games, how they handle depths of the mechanics is always worth taking note. Similar to what I have pointed out in my Bayonetta review, Vanquish contains the sort of mechanics that rewards players who discover and learn them, but at the same time are necessary in order to beat the game. Take dodge offset from Bayonetta for example. It reveals another layer of depth within the combat that allow players to play the game better, given if they are able to make use of it properly. In the case of Vanquish, while you are shooting, you can switch gun in the middle of fire to unleash more damage in a quick succession. This is useful when you are shooting the cores of the bosses before they close up again, or when you are facing bigger enemies, maximizing damage output within a short frame of time. You can shoot the grenades you toss and make them explode before they land on the floor. Doing this allows you to have more control on the AoE of the explosion. Same goes to the enemy's grenade. You can shoot at them before they reach you. Switching gun during a reload to the other slot and quickly switching it back allow players to fully reload the gun while skipping the entire reload animation. This technique feels great when you're playing with the mouse and keyboard. Wielding the middle mouse button to switch weapon in between reloading is very satisfying, almost like you're manually reloading the gun with a motion. Using this technique not only gives you an advantage, but also much more engaging than just pressing the R button and wait. All these hidden mechanics that are not explicitly explained to the players are not bugs or exploits. They are deliberately kept in as design choices for higher play skill, and hence increase the complexity of the already established mechanics. Vanquish is a cover shooter with an emphasis on speed. While the speed is reliant on the boost sliding alone, it delivers nonetheless, making it an unique experience filled with adrenaline rush that differs itself from other titles within the genre. Sure, the game can be played like an usual cover shooter, but by doing so it gets boring real quick. Planning ahead, sliding through cover to cover and execute what's in your mind by managing the AR meter is what the game wants you to do. The short length of the game doesn't undercut its value. It is a through and through, high energy, high speed, fast paced shooters that leaves little breather for the players. Though, like I mentioned, the reappearance of bosses may seem like filler at times. Lack of context on the scoring system threw away some replayability potential, but if you don't mind about scores that much, replaying it for the spectacle action guarantees a good time. As the only third-person shooter from Platinum and the only title Mikami had done under the studio, there's no lack of Platinum's DNA in it. For that, it is a game worth playing and be kept on the shelf. It is a small game that executes its purpose well. With that, I recommend you to not let this game slide away from your radar.